$100 million built this yacht. Gold, marble, a helipad, it had everything. Now it sits abandoned in Malta. No crew, no owner, just silence. The man behind it vanished, leaving debt and mystery behind. What really happened to him? Stick around because the truth is darker than it seems. They called it the Indian Empress, but it looked more like a floating kingdom. At nearly 95 meters long, it stood taller than a 9-story building and stretched longer than a football field. It wasn't just big, it was designed to impress and maybe intimidate. This wasn't some rental toy for the ultra-rich. It was custom-built for royalty. The yacht originally belonged to a prince from Qatar, but in 2006, it was purchased by a man who wanted more than luxury. He wanted attention. He didn't just want to be rich, he wanted the world to know it. The yacht was his stage and everything on board was part of the act. Inside, there were spiral staircases, custom paintings, and Italian marble floors. Each suite had its own design, its own scent, its own mood. Chandeliers hung in places where most ships don't even have ceilings. There was a fully equipped gym, a grand piano, and a staff trained to handle guests like royalty. On the top deck, a helicopter pad. Below deck, jet skis, speedboats, and a full crew quarter. The yacht could host over 100 people in full luxury. Parties were held that looked more like movie scenes than real life. Politicians, actors, and business moguls all came to drink, dance, and disappear into the night. But the yacht wasn't just about luxury, it was about power. And when something is built on an image alone, it doesn't take much for the cracks to show. What was this ship really hiding? And what was its owner trying to prove? To understand the yacht, you have to understand the man behind it. Vijay Mallya wasn't born into struggle. He inherited wealth, status, and a business empire from his father. But what he wanted wasn't just money. He wanted a legacy. He wanted to be seen not as a businessman, but as a king. He was called the king of good times, and not as a joke. That was the image he sold. Expensive suits, champagne in one hand, a mic in the other, parties in Goa. Formula One cars are branded with his airline. His face was everywhere. Magazines, racetracks, political rallies, even whiskey ads. He owned United Breweries, one of India's largest liquor empires. He launched Kingfisher Airlines, which started off as a premium brand and quickly burned through money like jet fuel. But while the business cracked, the image stayed intact. That's what made him dangerous and admired.
Mallya didn't just attend parties, he was the party. Models, celebrities, politicians, all drawn to him. He served in the Indian Parliament. He called himself a patriot. But at the same time, he was borrowing massive loans from Indian banks, loans that were tied to failing businesses and disappearing records. Still, the lifestyle went on. He bought the Indian Empress not just as a toy, but as a floating symbol of power. He docked it in Europe, threw lavish events on board, and invited the world to see just how untouchable he seemed. But behind the flash was something fragile. The yacht was real, the money behind it wasn't. And when things started falling apart, he didn't try to fix it. He vanished. But not before leaving behind a trail of debt, lawsuits, and a crew stuck on a yacht that no longer had an owner. For years, Vijay Mallya lived like nothing could touch him. His face was on billboards. His airline ran TV commercials set to thumping music and flashing lights. His yacht sailed the Mediterranean like a floating monument to success. But beneath the champagne and camera flashes, the numbers were quietly falling apart. Kingfisher Airlines was bleeding money. What started as a luxury airline became a financial black hole. Expensive routes, high salaries, and constant losses pushed the company into chaos. Planes were grounded. Staff went unpaid. Still, Mallya smiled through it all, promising things would turn around. They never did. To keep his empire running, he started taking loans. Lots of them. Reports say he borrowed from more than a dozen Indian banks, stacking up nearly $1 billion in debt. But where the money went? That's where things get murky. Most of it never came back. Some loans didn't have enough collateral. Others had missing paperwork. Many were granted on reputation alone. But the truth couldn't stay buried forever. By 2012, Kingfisher Airlines was shut down. Employees protested. Banks grew nervous. The media started asking questions. But Mallya? He kept throwing parties. He still traveled, still smiled for photos. The Indian Empress was still docked in Malta, still shining, until one day it wasn't. As the pressure mounted, Mallya quietly left India. He flew to the UK in early 2016, just before arrest warrants were filed. He claimed it was just a business trip, but he never came back. That's when the real collapse began. Lawsuits followed, investigations launched. Indian banks accused him of fraud and money laundering. He became the face of corporate abuse, a man who lived like royalty, using other people's money. And as India tried to bring him back, one question lingered. What happened to everything he left behind, including the yacht? Because while Mallya stayed silent in London, the Indian Empress sat docked in Malta, and with every passing month, it slipped deeper into silence. After Vijay Mallya fled India, the spotlight turned to the trail he left behind, and among the many things he abandoned, one stood out: the Indian Empress. At first, the yacht stayed docked quietly in Malta. No press release, no official handover, just silence. The ship that once hosted billionaires and royalty sat untouched. Tourists walked past it without knowing what they were looking at. $100 million ghost, hiding in plain sight. Inside, things were getting worse. The full crew, over 40 people, stayed on board for months, waiting, hoping they'd be paid. Many hadn't received salaries in over a year. Some refused to leave because they feared they'd never recover what they were owed. They worked, maintained the ship, slept in the same bunks. But no instructions came. No lawyers arrived. Mallya never responded. Eventually, they turned to the courts. Maltese authorities investigated. What they found wasn't just unpaid wages. It was legal chaos. The ship was owned by a web of shell companies, all of them tied back to Mallya. No one claimed responsibility. No one stepped in. The Indian Empress was now stranded, and the world slowly began to take notice. In 2018, Maltese courts ordered the yacht seized. A public auction was set. The once glorious vessel, filled with rare art and handcrafted interiors, was now a legal asset to be liquidated, a symbol of everything that went wrong. It was eventually bought by a Saudi businessman and renamed Neom, a new name, a new future. But the story stuck to it. People still whisper about the debts, the unpaid workers, the silence, and still no apology, no admission. Mallya, living in a London mansion, insisted he'd done nothing wrong. But a man who claims innocence doesn't leave his crew behind on a ship with no captain. The Indian Empress was more than a yacht. It was a stage, a statement, a floating symbol of power, ego, and excess. And in the end, it was left behind, stripped of meaning, docked in silence. What does that say about the man who owned it? Vijay Mallya was once praised as a visionary, a game changer, a man who lived louder than anyone else. But when the spotlight turned, he didn't defend his name. He ran. And while the courts argue, while the banks wait, and while his crew members still speak of unpaid wages, he remains quiet. The ship he left behind became a warning, a reminder that even the richest man in the room can lose control when the image matters more than the truth. So here's the question. If you had a chance to walk aboard that yacht today, knowing everything it represents, would you step on? Let us know in the comments. And if stories like this interest you, the hidden lives behind wealth, the power plays they don't want you to see, subscribe for more.